So on chapter 18, it's all about viruses and bacteria. And if you don't remember much about that, remember that we decided at the very beginning of the year that zombies/viruses are not living because of different purposes. Mainly that they can't reproduce on their own, they don't metabolize, and they don't grow, they don't develop. And those are one of the three of the main 5 types or reasons for living. And for a long time, we thought that all diseases were caused by bacteria because you can see a bacteria in a microscope, whereas you cannot see a virus in a standard light microscope because they're too small. And if you see right here, this is the size of a virus. This is the size of a bacteria. So most time we think, well, bacteria are really, really tiny. Well, viruses are even tinier. The first virus, sorry. The first virus they found was the tobacco mosaic virus. And basically the way that the story goes, or the way the research went, was they found these tobacco plants were basically coming out in these multicolored, kind of gross, scabby type drying out forms. And so they were trying to figure out, well, what's the reason for that? And what they did is they basically would mulch this up. They would then spray those that were unaffected with basically the serum of those that were affected. Okay, and they sprayed it and they contracted it. So they're like, okay, well, it's obviously got to be from the plant, and it's passed on to the plant. So then they ground up some more, but then they filtered it to a very small, very thin filter, and they sprayed it again, and it continued to infect it. So they realized that they basically made a filter small enough that would stop all known bacteria, but then it still would actually infect it. So they figured out it was something more than just bacteria, and they were then able to actually look farther than the size of the bacteria, and they were able to find these little viruses that are actually in there. And so they then purified those viruses, and just the viruses, they gave the viruses to new, unaffected plants, and they got the tobacco mosaic as well.
Was that on tobacco plants?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's called tobacco mosaic virus.
I always thought tobacco was a normal plant that grows around.
So viruses are very, very simple. They essentially have 3 parts to them. They have the nucleic acid. It could either be DNA or RNA. The DNA RNA could either be single-stranded DNA or double-stranded DNA. The RNA could either be single-stranded or double-stranded RNA, and we actually classify our viruses based on if it's single-stranded, double-stranded DNA or RNA.
What if something's triple-stranded?
It wouldn't be, I don't think.
It would be alien?
Yes. I don't know. I mean, sure, there probably could be a triple strand, but I'm not sure where it would connect to. Unless you had like a double strand that was like hydrogen bonded together, and then the triple strand like was wrapped around that, I guess. Maybe? Yeah.
One last thing.
All right, and then finally, as far as the reproduction of viruses, remember viruses cannot grow by themselves. They actually have to have a host cell, and that host cell that host cell then basically regrows new viruses.
I would argue that it's non-living. Like, I understand that it's not living, but you can't say it's non-living because it's not like a rock. Like, it's still like.
As far as the virus reproduction, it basically goes through the same kind of ideas as our replication and reproduction does, but the only difference is that so the virus has a capsid, which is basically the protein outside, and that capsid is essentially a key that's allowed to lock in. And each capsid only has a specific design. So we can't get viruses that dogs can get, a lot of them at least. Like we can't get the parvovirus, and we can't get, I'm pretty sure we can't get leptospirosis and those kind of things. Okay? We can't get air mites because it's not a virus, it's a parasite. Do what?
What is that?
What? Parvovirus? Parvovirus is it's
when you see a dog hanging its head.
yes. No, parvovirus is a virus that lives inside the dog, and it causes severe bleeding, like intestinal bleeding and vomiting and diarrhea, to the point that the dog won't even be able to basically hold food down. Most time it's passed along in the feces, in the dirt, and essentially if a lot of times if a puppy gets it, the puppy won't make it because they get so sick so fast.
Go to for most of adults can't recover.
Yeah.
Have y'all seen strays really with their head hanging real low? They have
A lot of times.
What's that one disease, like when they're
But
puppies?
each capsid has a specific key, and in our body they have those receptor proteins on the outside of our cell membranes, and as long as that key fits in the lock that allows the virus to come in, And so the viral DNA will then go into the cell's DNA, go through replication, create a protein, and the protein then makes new capsids. The DNA then mixes in with the capsids, and you have all these kind of viruses. Okay? So very quickly you can have one virus, yay, not a big deal, that has tons and tons of viruses just from one cell actually producing it. So it doesn't take very long at all. There are two different types of life cycles. There's the lytic life cycle, and just like the word lysis means to break apart. So the lytic life cycle, or the lytic life cycle, is where the virus basically makes new viruses and immediately ruptures the host cell. The lysogenic life cycle, genic means, or genesis means to create. So lysogenic means that basically it's going to insert its viral DNA into the cell's DNA, and then it'll basically not immediately break into new viruses. It'll basically allow the cell to split, either through mitosis or binary fission, and then it produces more virus DNA, and then it produces more virus DNA, until eventually it'll actually then go into the lytic cycle. So lysogenic basically just means the cell divisions continue to occur, whereas the lytic, it only takes one cycle, it makes new viruses, and then they split themselves apart. Okay. The lytic cycle is virulent. Virulent basically means deadly. It hurts the cell. Whereas the lysogenic cycle, it actually puts its DNA into it, and it becomes a temperate, or that prophase. So if you look back on this picture right here, temperate just means not deadly or not harmful. The prophase is this part right here. This is a phage DNA integrates into the bacterial chromosome, becoming a prophase. So when the virus DNA itself actually goes into the cell's DNA, it now has what's called a prophase.
Wait, so the virus puts the DNA in the bacteria and the DNA is mixed?
Yes. Just like how y'all did with the plasmid, where you cut out a certain section of that DNA and then insert it into the plasmid. It's essentially what the virus is doing. It basically cuts itself. It kind of like, you remember like in kindergarten, you're supposed to be in line. You could be a line cutter, right? You got to cut yourself into it, and you get to go earlier in the line. You get kicked out of the line. You have to go to the back of the line. Well, bacteria don't notice that they just got cut, and so the virus DNA actually cuts themselves into the line, and then they get to go through the cycle, the replication and the transcription translation cycle. So it essentially basically takes over that body, that cell body.
Can you give us like examples? Like which one would be worse to have?
So the lytic cycle is always worse to have.
Okay.
That would be the more virulent one. So like your standard cold virus, that would be most likely very lytic.
Okay.
Lysogenic cycle would be things like if you get herpes, the herpes virus will go into your DNA. There could be times when it becomes virulent where you actually have the outbreaks,
Okay.
but then also you always will have that herpes in there. Chickenpox. Chickenpox is a virus that once you get and you kind of go over it, right? You live through it and everything. That virus DNA is still in your body, so it's actually in the lysogenic cycle.
That's why it can cause shingles.
Yeah, and then when you get older, you start like getting stressed or some kind of mess up. That virus then says, "Oh wait, your body's like not going to be able to fight this off. Let's go ahead and regrow," and then they come back to shingles.
Okay. But like when you're like if you get it when you're old, you can die from chickenpox, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
why? Like, does it reproduce differently in like a kid than it does in an old person, or?
Just because the old person isn't able to fight it off nearly as easy, they don't have nearly as much resistance to it, and a lot of times they're helped with T cells, and the cells that the white cells that help fight against infection don't work nearly as well.
Does it? Like, how does it? Okay, I don't know. Like,
There are differences between animal viruses and plant viruses, and there's even bacterial viruses and all these different things. A lot of the animal viruses are RNA viruses, so I believe that the parvovirus is, the rabies virus is also an animal virus that is RNA based. And the viruses themselves could basically cause either two issues. Either they could rupture the cells themselves, go into the lytic cycle itself, or they could actually produce what's called endotoxins, which basically cause you to get sick. So instead of just rupturing the cell, it basically causes the cell itself to become toxic in that area. And so now viruses, if that happens, you can't really just treat it with antibiotics, because again, antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. They don't treat virus infections. And so essentially all you can do is prevent against getting viruses. If you end up getting a virus, the DNA is in your body now, and you either have to basically survive through the virus itself or not, basically. I mean, and like I said, it's already in your body, so you, even though like I was talking about the herpes virus, even if you're not showing symptoms now, that doesn't mean you don't have herpes anymore. Okay, like any of the STDs or any of the anything like that, just because you're not showing symptoms doesn't mean you don't have the actual disease itself. It's basically in remission.
What about like the flu? Like, are they just treating symptoms when they give you medicine?
Yeah. So if your doctor ever gives you like antibiotics, like they say, oh, you've got the flu. Here's some kind of, I don't know, antibiotic or whatever. They shouldn't give you antibiotics, but what they're probably giving you is like a nasal decongestant or like a nausea medicine.
White liquid.
There's actually now an antiviral medicine that we can give. It's called Tamiflu, and the Tamiflu actually does break the virus cycle really quickly, and so that might be what it is.
I was like, I don't know, it was a while ago.
Because it's
I was
like
8.
the common cold, I think, can last up to like 10 days. If you take Tamiflu, it only lasts about 3 days.
So like, okay, so like, chickenpox, you can get shingles when you're older.
Mhm.
The flu, like, what is that?
The flu's
Because you don't really hear about
right.
that affecting you.
No,
I know that
and
it can make your teeth discolored, because I got sick when I was a kid, and now my teeth are
a lot of the cyclines drugs, like tetracycline.
Is it the drug that does that?
Yeah,
Not
the drug will
actual
actually
teeth?
cause coloring. Yeah, like my wife has coloring on her teeth. It's because she took tetracycline, and it's actually what is actually limits the bone growth.
Oh, okay.
And the coloring, and so it's not good to give like tetracycline drugs. They just recently they've kind of realized this. They don't like to give them to a lot of the kids.
So, but like,
pediatrics.
do all viruses have like things that they can do you when you're older?
No, so
People in school are real smart.
plants do have specific viruses. So just know that basically you can't, like, if you have an animal virus, it's not going to cause all your ferns to get sick. Okay. And then there's also things called viroids and prions. So a viroid is actually what affects a virus. Yeah. So it's actually smaller than the virus itself, and it can actually cause issues with the viruses. But we've actually started looking at using viroids to treat viral infections. And the other one is prions, and prions are a specific kind of virus that fights or actually attacks the nervous system area. So a lot of have you ever heard of mad cow disease?
Yes.
That's actually caused by prions. Scabies, not scabies. Scabies, which is a disease you find in a lot of sheep, as well as deer, and then also the chronic wasting disease, which is also another deer disease. It's caused by prions, which is a neuro effect on it. But it's basically the same idea as a virus, though. Now, bigger than that are the bacteria. Remember, bacteria can both be harmful and helpful. Remember, we talked about helpful being like they make cheeses and can make yogurt for us. They make fermentation, but they can also cause harm to us. Remember, bacteria are prokaryotes, so they don't have any membrane-bound organelles. They do, though, remember, do have a plasmid, so that plasma is able to be passed along. And the things like a capsule and an envelope, essentially those are extra components around the bacteria to basically make them stronger. This glycocalyx is, if you ever go like wash your hands, it's actually not a bad deal. Like if they don't have soap, if you at least just water your hands under the water and rub your hands together. If you just like run under the water, it doesn't do anything, because most bacteria that's on your hands will have either cilia or this glycocalyx, which causes the stickiness. And so at least even running your hands in the water and rubbing them back together will actually help with it.
Infection that killed bacteria. Is that not a thing?
I don't think so.
That, like, just
It actually
come off?
legitimately washes them off.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've read something, I don't know if it was true, but like it didn't matter whether the water was hot or cold, because like the too hot water would like burn your skin. Shapes.
The last
Yes.
part I hear is called the endospores. So bacteria can actually last for a long, long time. When you go to the doctor, whenever they do surgery on you, they not only treat it with both heat, like the instruments they're going to use on you, or the thread, or whatever they're going to put into you or use on you. They also treat it with pressure. Because the problem is that the bacteria have these things called endospores. And essentially, the endospores are a really thick, solid coating that allows the DNA in the cytoplasm to last for many years long. And so even if they go through and they're, okay, we're going to use a scalpel to do surgery on you, and they just heat it and just sterilize it by heat, it won't kill all the bacteria. So they have to do actually heat and pressure, and the pressure itself actually breaks down those endospores to allow for them to clean it.
Do viruses work like that? Like, can they live outside of the body?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some viruses, most viruses that have to have a host. I know I forget which ones they are, but I know I've heard of some that can live outside the body for a while.
But not all of them can.
Right. Yeah. On your coloring sheet, I did give you examples of the different types of shapes of viruses. No, it's not triangles, squares, or circles. It is circles. It is circles, spirals, or rods. And I don't know if y'all have ever seen this before. If you have, tell me. For me to like remember what's what is that the spherical or the circular ones. If you look at all the letters, all the letters are round in shape, right? So C's, those are all round. Whereas the rods, the bacilli, all these are very long, straight letters, right? And so those are the rods. And then the spirillum, well, it just looks like spiral, right? And so those are the three shapes. There's actually 5 shapes. There's the vibro and the, which is basically a spiraled rod. And then there's one other, I forget what that is. But basically you need to know those 3. Those are the main ones. It's cocci, spirillum, and bacillus. And so we name our bacteria based on that. So if you get streptococcus, well, you're distracting me.
I was hoping, you know.
If you get something like a streptococcus, basically streptococcus, which is what strep throat is essentially a string or a strep, which strep means string, which is on the next slide, of round bacteria. And so if when they do swabs on you and they look at the bacteria, they will look at what the shape and the size and is it a cluster, is it in a long string, is a cluster in groups of 4, is a cluster in groups of 2, because each bacteria will be shown in different clusters. So if you look down on the left, that is a staphylococcus. You can tell because they're all clustered together. Okay, whereas this is streptococcus because they're long strings. So each bacteria, each infection will look differently, and they can determine what antibiotics they want to use on you based on what kind of bacteria it is. Because certain bacteria will be able to grow differently, will be able to be more resistant against certain antibiotics, whereas other bacteria cannot. And the main way they can do this is by doing, don't worry about that, is by doing what's called a Gram test. And a Gram test is a stain. And essentially what happens is that they will dip the stain into a Gram purple stain, and then they'll wash it off, and then they'll dip into a Gram pink stain. If it is Gram positive, it will be purple. If it's Gram negative, it will be pink. And what that basically means is that, you remember that extra capsule layer? If it has an extra layer, it actually has 3 layers of basically protection, whereas instead it normally will only have 2. And essentially the reason why it'll stay purple is because when you stain it purple, if it only has 2 layers, then that purple immediately takes it in. But if it has the 3 layers, the purple actually gets washed off because it doesn't hold on to the purple. So then you get bacteria like, next one, there. So you get bacteria like that. And so some of these are negative and some of these are positive. So if you look at this chart, the one here, if it's a Gram positive, then you can use things like ampicillin. But if it's not, then you have to then up your antibiotics to things that are cyclin.
So what if it has both?
If it has both, then you would just go with the cyclins. Because cyclins will kill both the negative as well as the positives. And here's the reason why. If you look, this is that really thick layer. That thick layer will stain purple because there is no other extra, what's called this lipopolysaccharide layer. And that actually is what ends up staining pink. Because when you stain it purple, the purple will stay right here. You wash it off, the purple goes away. But then you stain it pink, and you don't wash it off the second time, it will stay pink. Whereas these, you stain it purple, it'll soak into this thick murin layer, and that purple will stay. So when you stain it pink, it won't stay pink, it'll just stay purple.
So if you're like penicillin, will they just give you cyclin?
If you're allergic to penicillin, they've got other drugs like penicillin. Yeah. So, okay.